Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Claude Sharadi, and welcome to the show. This is the 14th edition of African Knowledge, and tonight we're talking about addressing mental health in African Australian communities. More on this topic in just a moment. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure again to know that you are watching, and we're very excited because we're getting very, very good feedback, and people are very happy with the content we've been providing as part of this show, and we'll continue to enable African professionals, African ordinary members of the African Australian community to share their knowledge, their expertise, their insight, their wisdom on any topic that is of interest to the community that adds value to the lives of African Australians. And we know right now with everything that is going around with COVID and the crisis that we're still grappling with, there are a lot of issues, and that plays on people's minds. And some of us are being affected by mental health. So this is why we have decided to invite a special member of our community who has expertise in this area to talk to us about mental health. And tonight I have the pleasure of introducing Mrs. Sharon Orapeleng. Sharon, how are you tonight?
I am very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Sharon lives in Brisbane. She is a mental health clinician. She's been practicing mental health for quite a long time, and we'll get her to give us a bit more information about who she is, what she does, and everything else. Go ahead, Sharon.
I need to correct you. I'm not working as a clinician. I'm working as a mental health professional in policy. Yes, in policy. So I, as well as do a whole lot of other things through my consultancy through Psych Solutions. I do a lot of training around mental health first aid and help workplaces, communities, individuals really learn how to have a safe conversation about mental health issues and help people who are around them and link people to support services that are available. So that is a very critical component of building what I call the community of well-being warriors, where we are looking after each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Sharon, let me ask you, do you think mental health within Black communities, African Australian communities, is different from other communities?
I think it's how we see what and how we explain what mental health issues are. Mm-hmm. That is what is different. The experiences, the feelings, the different conditions are exactly the same, but how we explain what is happening to us is very much influenced by the cultures that we come from, by the language we speak, by our upbringing, our experiences of the world. That really differs in how we articulate exactly what is going on to what is going on in our lives, as well as what we think is the right support and treatment and care that we can access. That is very much influenced by the culture and the language and our upbringing. And so, whereas the main kind of things that makes what it is a mental health issue is exactly the same, it is the narratives around what it is that's happening around us. And what it is that we experience, and that is different. For example, I don't know if you need an example, but I'll give you an example. So, I may be experiencing, depression. In my language, there might be no name, no language to say what depression is. It might be just in my language, I describe it as things that are happening in my head, that there's too many things. I'm overwhelmed with thoughts, too much thoughts in my head that are negative, that I feel like I can't do things. But am I not necessarily connected to a mental health issue as a Western person, a Western world person can connect it to? I might say that it is because I haven't gone and visited my grandfather's grave to pay my respect, or I haven't actually done a ritual that I was supposed to do in order to be free, especially from the connections with Badimu, the people who are past, our ancestors. So I might have a different explanatory model about what is actually happening to me that is different from somebody from an wider Australian background, for example. So the expressions and how we talk about mental health is very different between communities.
Okay, that's very good. Now, simple question: what's the simplest definition of mental health?
I say to people, mental health is a continuum. It's from what we call languishing, when we're experiencing challenges in life, and things are just hard and we're not able to apply ourselves and thrive. Our relationships are impacted. Our connections with community is impacted. Our ability to study and go to work is impacted. So we are really in this hole, in this rut, that we are not able to seem to just get ourselves out of it. So that is when we're really struggling. But there may be some times when we are just struggling, but still able to function, still able to go to work, and it's not as hard. It's not as hard. I'm still able to do things, but that doesn't mean I'm okay. And it may be that I'm in the flourishing side, in the thriving side, where I am literally feeling like I'm on top of the world, that I'm able to take anything that comes through my way, that I am able to apply myself to the best of my ability, that the life is good. And there is no challenges. And if challenges come in, I'm able to deal with them because I build capacity and strategies to help me deal with challenges in life. So mental health itself is actually a continuum, goes from languishing to thriving or flourishing. So when we talk about mental illness, though, it is when we are at that struggle side, right? Where we are not able to apply ourselves fully because things are happening to us. Our thoughts, our feelings, our behaviors are indicative of the struggles that are impacting on us.
All right, that's very good. Now let's look at what causes mental health. I'm sure there are a lot of causes, but what are some of the most common ones?
You see, people often want to get, if I can tell you this right from the beginning, if we knew exactly one thing that causes mental health issues, we would have completely fixed it immediately. Because as people, we are very resourceful and we know the burden of disease or the impact of mental health issues in our lives. So I believe that, the world would have found a cure if we were able to isolate exactly one thing that causes mental health issue. I can tell you now that there is not one thing. There are many things that put us at risk of mental illness. Many things. There are social determinants, as we call them. This is whether we have our health. If I'm having a chronic disease, I'm struggling with my diabetes, my blood sugar levels, my chronic pain, or illness that is really impacting on my physical health, it is surely going to impact on my mental health as well. If I'm not able to get the work that that fulfills me, that I can feel that I'm contributing. If I'm not included in a community, I face racism. I'm told to every single time when I show up, up. I'm told to go back to my country. That's going to impact on my mental health, and it's going to put me at risk to mental illness. If I'm not able to get my job because even though I have 5 degrees in my field of expertise, but I'm not able to apply that because there are barriers for me to come in. That's going to impact on my mental health. If I'm not able to have the family I want, and there's conflict. If I have experienced childhood trauma and things have been tough for me, I've witnessed war and things have happened in my life, all of those things, even in genetic factors, there are predispositions to mental health issues, but it's not just one thing. It's very much multifactorial. There are many combination of things. In fact, the simplest way that I can put it about mental health issues is, as long as there is life, you and I are at risk of mental health issues because life happens.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no exclusion. There is no special people who will be completely free. There is no, because life happens, the challenges of life happens, things happens to us. You and I and everybody else will have a predisposition or a risk factor to mental health.
That's good. Now, in our communities, often we don't talk a lot about mental health because, for a variety of cultural reasons or even other reasons, it is seen often as a taboo, or people are not encouraged, culturally speaking, to discuss mental health. What is it that we should do to make the conversation around mental health a little more comfortable and easier for people?
I always say we have to talk about it. We don't speak in our communities, we don't speak about mental health issues because we have a reason or a description of why we experience what we experience. That may not be true, that might be true, that might be influenced by a whole lot of things. So, and because of what we term in the mental health language as stigma, which means that when we think, when things are happening to us, there are judgments that are attached to that experience. Mental health issues have a lot of judgments, that you should have done this. If you didn't want to have, if to prevent this, you should have done that. There's a lot of blame and shame about our experiences, as if we should have had all the control to make life go perfectly well in our lives, even though we know that life will never be perfectly well. There is no perfection in life. We can strive towards it, but there is no perfection. And hurt happens. Hurt happens. You might be driving and you have a car accident and that whole experience hurt you, impact you, create what I call an emotional wound. A wound that every single time you get in that car, you are not able to drive because everything starts coming back again. You might have ran for your life because your village where you come from was in war and you had to escape. And then you walked, days to a refugee camp where you were afraid of your life and you've seen people around you die. And that impacts on you. But then our community will look at that and think, oh, you should just toughen up. You should just, there is something wrong with you. And I want to say, yes, there is something wrong with me because I have experienced this. There is something wrong because life has not been perfect when I thought it would be perfect and I will feel safe and I will be able to thrive and every opportunity will be presented to me. But that hasn't happened. And as a result, that has created a wound that is festering in my mind that requires help to be able to deal with it. And it's impacting on my whole of selves, is impacting on me now, right now. So it is because we don't have that language to really talk about what is happening for us. Because you know what? Sometimes when I talk to people from different cultures and I ask them, what is your language? How do you describe mental health in your language? They will say, there is no mental health in my language. What are you talking about? But it's only when you dig deeper about how do you deal with when you're struggling with things of the mind. And they say, oh, in my culture, I have Rakadi, or I have Mama Lome, which is my aunt, that I can talk to. And people know that in every culture, there are elders, there is a pathway in cultures, pathways to support for emotional things. When you need to talk to someone, there are people that have been identified or naturally in the culturally take up the role to support you. So it's only when you start to delve in and ask people of what happens when people start to describe that's when they connect. Oh, so does that mean that that's mental health, that I was experiencing some mental health issues? It might not have been diagnosable as in the Western way, using the DSM-5 and the way we describe mental health, the Western way, but it is the language that we understand about how we create a structure and an explanation about what's happening for us culturally that then connects us to realize that actually we're not that different. That's not that different to that person who calls that depression. That's not different from that person that calls that anxiety. That's actually not different from what that person calls psychotic illness, because it's something that do happen in my culture. We might just have a different language to say what that is. So this is how I often talk to people in different cultures. And I talk to them about language, about describing what it is. Even emotional description. I'm feeling sad. What does that mean in your culture? How do you describe it without talking about sadness in the English language as we know it and how we describe it in English? What does sad mean? In my language of Setswana, I come from Botswana, it's a botlhoko. When we say I'm feeling botlhoko, that I'm hurt, I have pain, and that it means emotional pain. So you see, that then translates directly to what we know happens when somebody's experiencing a mental health issue. By describing it in language and in culturally that in things that we understand, we can then connect it to what we know. Because hey, we are all human, right? We experience these things the same. But one of the things that once we know how to describe these things, then we are able to be open to support systems that are available to us and access support. Because one of the things that I know is people from our cultures do not access help until they are so unwell. They are so unwell. When you are very, very unwell, it really means that you have disengaged from work, you have disengaged from family and friends, you've disengaged from life. You're no longer engaging in activities that brings you joy, that makes you thrive. So you are in this very dark, deep hole. So to come out of that with support, it's going to take you way longer. And when you have realized that you are getting there and you have said, hello, here I am, I'm drowning, I need help.
Okay. Well, obviously, early diagnosis helps almost in every condition, and mental health. Mental health, obviously, it's
no
even
different.
more relevant, no different. Now, there are some. You mentioned that there are a lot of things that can cause mental health, but what are some of the triggers? I know, for example, you may have a traumatic event that you have lived long ago, or you may even have, I don't know, genetic predispositions to mental health. I'm not an expert. I'm just sort of thinking loudly. But what does trigger mental health in most circumstances?
As I said before, it's life, really. Life triggers mental health experience. Take for example, right now, we are experiencing the most unprecedented period that these generations alive today have never experienced it. The COVID-19 pandemic. We are seeing the lockdowns. We are seeing the not knowing. We can't plan. I want to go home. My mother died in 2019. I want to be able to go home and fix her grave. That is important as part of my healing from all of this. I can't go, and I have no idea when I'll be able to go home back to Botswana and do that process. I can't plan for the future. Even just thinking about school holidays for my son and my family to take a holiday, I can't plan that because I don't know whether we're going to be in lockdown in October, in November. So we are experiencing all of these things that we've never had experienced before, and we're trying to navigate. We're trying to kind of make sense of it, and it's sometimes doesn't actually make sense. So we are struggling. We are struggling, and people are struggling. One of the things that for me that has been a struggle for my mental health, especially recently, has been the incredible loss of loved ones back home. Botswana, unfortunately, since July was one of the world most impacted country by the Delta variant, and being a very small country, so although the numbers might have looked small to other people, but to a country that of 2.3 million people, the numbers were enormous and people died. So there were over 10 people that I know very closely in my relatives and my family, that the close-knit family that passed on. It was days where every single morning I wake up and there is a message that says somebody had died. I was finding myself just literally in this space. And here in Queensland, we have been doing very well, fortunately, with COVID-19, that we haven't had as many lockdowns. So life was kind of back to normal. But life was not normal for me, because here I am having to show up to work when I've just received a message that somebody that I love has passed on with mental health, with COVID-19. And I have to literally get in the shower and put my makeup on and go to work as if life was okay. No. I got to a point where, one day I was in a meeting and I burst out, and I came to that meeting, thinking everything is, I can handle this. And I logged in, and the first conversation in that meeting was a conversation about COVID-19. And I found my tears I was overwhelmed. And there in a meeting with stakeholders, I had to say, I am not okay. I'm not coping. This is too much for me. I'm in pain. And it's an emotional pain. And sometimes it's so hard for us to describe what that is and what that looks like. And often that's when you see people, you see is visual, it's so physical, right? You see the tears come, you see the heart, palpitating, you see the person just crawling into the corner and just wanting to hug themselves and wanting to shut the world out. I was going through that absolute spiral because I was experiencing things that I had never experienced before. I reached out for help because I know that help is what will help me climb up again out of this hole that I was getting in. I took time off work. I did a lot of other self-care strategies. I put things in place. I needed me to show up to keep me well with the help of others around me, with the help of my family, with the help of the professionals, because I recognized that things were not going okay.
Yep. All right.
So life puts us at risk of mental health. The experiences of life puts us at risk of mental health. And how I deal with things might be completely different to how you deal with things. So things might happen exactly the same in both our lives. Exactly the same, identical. You lose 10 people, or I lose 10 people, or 20 people, whatever number. But you are okay. You're able to go on and do the things because you might be sad, but it hasn't actually really impacted you or wounded you as much as it's wounded me. And it's not being able to kind of put each other in a what do you call it, in a competition that that this has been worse for you. You should be feeling that way. No, it's because as human beings, we are different, and the way we experience things are different. And it's really accepting that what can impact on me and cause mental health issues might not be what impacts on you and cause mental health issue for you.
Yeah.
And also it's about what other strategies that you have put in place, that you have access. You might have the support network that can help you through all the challenges, which I might not have. So how I then deal with what's happening for me takes a little longer than what others. So we can never really compare ourselves about how we deal with experiences, although there might be the same type of experiences.
Now let's talk about self-help strategies. You've mentioned that, and that's obviously important. Besides making people aware of mental health issues and the fact that people have to be proactively looking for help when they sense that they are not okay, now it's important for people to develop self-help strategy. And with your experience in this field, what are some of the and I understand what the point you just made, that people have different ways of dealing with mental health, and people have different support networks which may make a difference. But in a theoretical sort of perspective, let's talk about a few self-help strategies that are also culturally relevant for Black folks like us. Can you name a few?
Absolutely. And I've been exploring this, by the way, for me to keep myself well. And I think that every single one of us when it comes to our physical health, we have our goals, right? We have goals. We might be having goals about how much we eat, what we eat, because we know the impact of that to our physical health. We might have goals about how many exercises we do per week, the walk, whatever strategies we employ to keep our physical health well and going. That engine of the body going. We have ideas. We know what it is. We can articulate it. So it is always so interesting that we treat mental health very differently. And I come to people and I often talk to people about self-care or self-help strategies. And I say, what tools do you have to keep you well mentally? People often look at me and go, huh? What do you mean? I don't have time. Gosh, I don't have time. I said, if you don't keep you well, there's only one you. If you don't keep you well, who else is going to keep you well? What's going to happen to you? So what is your plan? So there are many things that work, fortunately, that we can do to reduce the chances of us experiencing a very, very dark period in our lives, even when things are not going okay. So because life happens, we are always at risk, right? So that is one factor. Just like physical health, if we do certain things, we are able to keep ourselves better and healthier for longer, and we're able to do the things we love to do longer because we are actively engaging in physical care. And keeping ourselves well physically. So even the same thing with mental health. There are things that we call mindfulness, and sometimes you look at these kind of words, and because they're English words and they're not able to connect that to our cultural words. And I've been saying to people, actually look into your own cultures. What are the things that we do in our cultures that keep us well? There are the mindfulness, for example, be having a quiet time to just be. In my culture in Botswana, in Botswana, we have a way of telling people around us that this is my me time. We will tell people, even a child or other adults, and saying, which means I'm going back to find a space that is safe for me to be who I am and just to be. I need to just reduce and be present, reduce whatever is happening in my body and be present in quietness, in a meditative-like state, and just be with myself. You are listening to yourself. In a direct translation to English, that's what it means. Now, when you describe that process to someone, you realize that it's very much aligns what we know as meditation, as mindfulness, as other kind of these innovative therapeutic strategies that people use to address and help people be well and start their journey towards healing. It's exactly some of the things that we do already in our cultures. It's just that we call them differently. Even some of the other strategies like cupping. When you get things on your back, and they call it cupping, and it's like it takes toxins out from your body, and there is this belief that when you put that thing that sucks out the whatever toxins in your back, then you feel better. You feel better after that. In our traditional cultures, they used horns. They used to use horns in our traditions, and back people in our ancestors used horns to cup people in through our backs. We might not have called it cupping because it would have had a name to describe that process that was happening. But that was a process that traditionally meant that you learn about healing. So the healing processes, healing strategies exist in our ancient cultures that we haven't actually gone back to and connected with. The smoking. I smirch, I do use the smoking ceremonies where you're smoking the spirits and cleaning the energy. Ancestors did that. And different cultures from the north of Africa to down south of Africa, you will find things that helps people to keep well. That is very ingrained in our culture. Talking to someone. Having a conversation. A problem shared is a problem halved, I say. And we knew that the auntie, how many of us, I hear young African Australians when they see me, hi, auntie, because they recognize it's something in most of the African cultures where an older person is seen as having a role. It's like a safe space. If you go to them about your problems, they will help you. So we already have structures and things that are inbuilt in our communities and in the most different cultures that we have, that allows us to engage and start the process of keeping ourselves well mentally. And it's really starting to recognize, I call it really decolonizing mental health care. It is taking away the labels or the names that look foreign to us, and bringing it back to the things that we already know. And once we do have that language, that's when we start to connect. And that's when we start to actually engage with professional help. Then it starts to not become a barrier that person might look a different color and might not be able to help me, because I would then be able to translate. And especially if the practitioner, the clinician, knows exactly how that description looks like, and are able to engage with you cross-culturally.
So we also need, I suppose what you're saying, sorry to interrupt, you got to develop a relevant vocabulary that
absolutely
that connects the concept of what is happening with your cultural understanding of things. But by the way, do we have? You probably would know more what state of the literature we have in terms of mental health. Is there a significant amount of literature that is sort of African related to help people with mental health, or are we just relying on what is developed in the West?
Because what happened in most of our cultures is, we are orally based cultures. So things that work, we talk about them. So our our grandparents will talk about things, will do things, and as children we watch. That is how often knowledge is translated or transmitted to generations. We didn't go and write and say, put people up in an experiment and do all these different things so we can say, hey, this is evidence-based. What is evidence-based? Evidence-based doesn't, or peer-reviewed doesn't necessarily, it's a structure that has been developed by others.
Yes.
That hasn't fitted in our cultural context of storytelling, of impacting knowledge, of transmitting knowledge. But that doesn't mean that the experiences of the things that happen to us in our lives and that happen to our generations of our grandparents are not evidence-based. They worked. They still work.
That's right.
So what I often do, though, is to encourage people who are interested in field of research. A lot of Africans, I did my master's by research. A lot of Africans don't get into research. We do go to university. You all know many Africans who have the doctorates. They go and do research and other things, but they don't do the research that is relevant and based in using our practices, not just in mental health, but in a whole lot of different fields, in astronomy, in science, in a whole lot of different fields, that we are not actually getting and attracting people to get into research so they can develop what the Western world called evidence-based. So when things become innovative, we say that these are actually things that have been happening in the cultures for thousands of years. Not just that somebody has done a research and call it innovative practice. It's actually just that we haven't done, what we call a scientific research methodology on it to describe it in a way that we can then show its effectiveness. And even though we know what its effectiveness is. So it's really encouraging diversity and interest in research and evidence-based, knowing that this is how the world, we're no longer in 150 years ago. The world relies on this type of evidence-based in order to do things and accept any different methodology or any different practice to be what works. Okay, so this is just how the world is. So we need to encourage more people to get into research and show that evidence base.
All right, let's take a bit of a break, commercial break, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back. Now, let's let me just remind those watching. We encourage you to ask questions. I see a lot of comments that you're posting there, and that's very, very good. Ask questions if you have any, and we'll get Sharon to respond to that. So if you've just tuned in right now, you're watching African Knowledge on African Media Australia, and we're talking today about mental health within African Australian communities, how to address these issues. And we have Sharon, who is an expert in this field, and she's sharing her insight and knowledge with the community. Now, Sharon, whether it's, as you said, mental health can be sort of experienced in many ways, and it may be anxiety, depression, PTSD, bipolar, all these sort of things. And there are, as you said, it's kind of a continuum. Some are, more sort of mild sort of symptoms, and other more serious. But there are, I suppose, let's talk now on how we deal with this. And you've talked already about some of the self-help strategies. But let me just pick an issue, for example, relationship issues, which also can affect people quite significantly, whether it's a divorce or something of that type, a breakup, and then people develop these sort of mental health issues. How do you sort of deal with specific issues within that whole continuum of mental health? Do you have specific strategies for each issue, whether it's a relationship, whether it's stress, work, or addiction, or gambling, all those sort of things that can be linked to mental health?
Absolutely. And you see, we are very fortunate that we live in Australia. And Australia has people who are very experienced in specific issues that are relating to all the determinants of mental health issues. So, for example, you will have a specialist psychologist or a counselor that deals with only gambling issues or addiction, alcohol and other drugs addiction. And that is the specialist area. So there is different systems that are built around these different experiences of life. So if you're experiencing relationship issues, there's Relationship Australia that provides counseling for people who are experiencing relationship issues, and can provide, one-on-one counseling or couple therapy that to help you deal with the issues that are relating to talking to each other and relating to the connectedness of in a relationship. There are people who specializes in intimacy and sex, and which is another dimension, part of relationship issues, and they can help people fix that very particular thing. If it is grief and loss that is impacting on you, there are special services that are specific to that cohort of grief and loss. So it is an incredible array and a full array of different support systems that are built, even if it's about finances. It's about budgeting and how you're going to deal with what's going on right now. People have lost jobs due to COVID. There is a whole lot of, they have to pay the mortgage, they have to pay their rent, and they don't know when they're going to get a job because their specific skill has much been, they're in a lockdown. They can't go and work in a coffee shop, for example. They can't do the things that other people are able to do at home because of the nature of their work. So they've lost income, and they're worried about the future and about how they're going to be able to meet these increasing bills that are piling up. So there is financial counseling that is specific to that area of stress, that thing that impacts you more. So whatever it is, really, whatever it is that you're struggling with, first of all, you have to be able to name it. Right? You have to be able to name it and what it is that impacts. And often it's not just one thing, right? Because, hey, life throws a whole lot of curveballs and, all these balls at us that we're just trying to juggle. And it could be family, relationship, work, and it becomes everything. Even if it becomes everything, you have ability to go and get support for everything. And when you go and sit with the professional, I've had people calling me sometimes and saying to me, I don't know where to begin to tell you what's going on for me. And I say to them, just begin wherever it feels okay for you to begin. Whatever comes first, let's talk about it. And for me, I do this as a mental health first aider. It's providing mental health first aid. And when somebody reaches out with everything that's there, they have been feeling overwhelmed, they need a space to be able to say to someone someone who's going to listen to them without judgment, that I am experiencing this, that this is a struggle for me. I don't know where to begin because it feels like my whole life is going into pieces. And once they start to talk and just even in one thing, you are able to just start to hear them connect the dots as they continue with the conversation. As I listen and support and validate and be a safe space for that person to say what's going on for them, and asking them, how long you've been feeling this way? Have you talked to someone about this? There are people that you can talk to about this. You don't have to do life alone. There are people who are experienced who can be able to support you through this.
All right. I'll take a few questions and some comments as well from the public as we get close to the end. We still have about 10 minutes or so. Dr. William Abu says, do you think people from African community groups are accessing mental health services? So what's the level of access in your
Not
experience?
much. No, not much at all. And that doesn't mean that people are not experiencing support, experiencing difficulties. It is because most of the time, by the time they come into a mental health service is when it's under a mental health act. The police have been called, an ambulance have been called, and they are under a treatment order, where they're involuntary assessed and involuntary treated. That, for me, is right at the end where they're really severe experience of mental health issues. So, which means that people are not, when they are struggling, right at the, early on, when it's still, it's been going on for a few days, for a month, for a few weeks, and it hasn't gone too deep, but it is really starting to impact on your life. People are not saying, hello, I'm here, I need help, and connecting to the support system. Either they don't trust that what they are accessing would be of value to them, because they're thinking they're not going to understand what I'm talking about, or they may think that I'm crazy. Because from your background, you might have heard that if people are experiencing the kind of symptoms that you're experiencing, that is, they have been bewitched, they're crazy, or they're not praying enough, they need to start praying more, or they need to go to a traditional doctor. So there are things that have been said to us that actually stops us from getting help earlier on, before things do get really bad. Or sometimes just because, what will people say? What will people say? Oh, that I have a mental health issue. But hey, if I break my leg today, I'll be the very first person to take a picture of my broken leg and myself, lying in a hospital bed and saying to people, pray for me, I'm in a hospital. It is no difference if I am experiencing a mental health issue and it's my struggles and I'm getting treatment and support, that I need the community to rally around me, just as if I had cancer, just as if I had a heart attack, just as if I had any other physical illness, because the impact of mental health conditions are as real as any of those physical illness.
Absolutely. And perhaps one word in this, is the problem also because, when we call it mental health, when somebody goes local, it's he's going mental. And when we say mental health, it's kind of related. Are there any new ways, perhaps, as we were talking earlier about
language,
vocabulary, describing, getting a more cooler type of vocabulary that would perhaps encourage people to deal with this,
to talk about it. You see, I often say mental health and well-being. There's this thing in me that I don't want to say mental health, and I often see people and I say, should we say? And I think, actually, to break the stigma that associated with it, we need to name it. We need to name what it is. We need to claim what it is. When I tell people about my mental health experience with anxiety, I was diagnosed with anxiety and I was diagnosed with PTSD. And I say what it is. I describe it. For me, there is no shame in it. It's an experience that I've gone through, that I know that in my lifetime, there'll be times when I'm well, there'll be times when I struggle, depending on what happens in my life. And that's okay. I'm learning how to live life to the full, even whatever it is that life throws at me, with whatever I experience and I have within me. If you have a condition with for example, a high blood pressure, and you're taking tablets for it, you still live your life. You don't say to people, exclude me because I have a high BP. You actually will tell people, hey, I need to eat by 4 p.m. because my insulin is low. I have diabetes. You are able to say that to people. And I need my insulin injection right now, because that keeps you alive. Mm-hmm. So if you need to take medication for your mental health issue and keeps you alive, go for it. If you need to go and see a psychologist to keep you alive, go for it. That should be no difference in that. So I actually think that we need to not make it sexier and find some language that is, we should just call what it is. Call it what it
is. But if it can be made, if it can be made sexy and cooler, still address the problem, why not? I don't know, but that's probably for you guys who deal with mental health. And
you see, I believe that having these kind of conversations and these platforms. So thank you for allowing this platform to be able to talk about this and normalize these conversations, and help ourselves to find the language that is better suited to describe. Because I'm not going to tell you, just go and call it if you want to speak about mental health in your language, and there's a better language or a language that describes it, or a word that describes it better in your language, I would really be saying, you use that. Mental health is the English word of how we use it. When we know we and I speak Setswana. If I want to call it, something in my language that is much more relevant to me, you call it that. You call it that. And you can call it that in your language and say in English it is. So I've been using a lot of Setswana words when I describe things about mental health or any other things that are happening to me, because I speak Setswana, and I use the Setswana language, the Setswana word, which then I translate to others who don't know speak Setswana. I translate it to English. That's how we start to make those connections on our experiences. And normalize conversations.
Yeah, and another question is how do you actually break down the cycle of fear in our communities about mental health? I guess you've sort of touched on a little bit, but I don't know if you've got something else to add to break that cycle of fear.
It is really normalizing it, the experience of mental health, and telling people that if it is okay. These are the things that already exist. We've created this fear, but in our cultures, when we experience some of these issues, there were ways for us to deal with it. We need to take the fear out of it. It's actually upon us as human beings, as individual beings in the African community, to change this narrative so that our young people don't have to struggle with this type of narrative. We normalize. In my family, my boy is 12 years old. My son knows about mental health because he knows I talk about mental health. When he's struggling, I'm giving him language to describe what his feelings are. We know we're checking in on every day when he comes to school. He comes over and say, "Mom, how was your day? How are you feeling today?" And he inquires, he checks in. So he normalized the conversations about feelings, about emotions, because we should not be afraid to describe that.
I suppose, and I'm sorry to interrupt, I suppose there's another issue which I remember, the fact that, for example, nowadays we give kids so many words that has to do with emotions. That's good to some extent, but it also possibly makes them vulnerable to in some other extent. For example, even very little kids will tell you, "You're hurting my feelings," and all that sort of thing. Even though in one way it's good that she's aware of that, but the fact that she's also how do I put it, verbalizing it, could also be sort of a double-edged sword, don't you think?
A double-edged sword, but in our cultures, though, we had language about how we were feeling. When somebody hurts us, you've hurt me. We were able to verbalize that in our languages, but we also knew where to go, to who to talk to. So it's just that now my son is saying the same thing, but he's saying it in English, and it looks and feels foreign, but it's actually not. It's actually not. When you think back in your life, how you expressed your emotions to and shared what's going on with you to others around you. If you are growing up in the village, like I grew up in a village of Hebron in Botswana, I can tell you there was no mental health professionals in there, and we're living life as it unfolds in the village. But I knew who to talk to. I had a safe space. I could express what was going on for me.
All right, and quickly before we finish, let's explore a little bit the relationship between mental health and spirituality, because I know that there's a lot of there's a tendency within African communities for those who are spiritual, and I know the number of people in our communities who are spiritual, either as Christians or Muslim or some type of spirituality, is quite high, and people tend to think that if they are really strong in their faith, they're kind of immune to mental health. Is that your experience as well?
Absolutely not. And I would always bring it back to people, said if you are immune, if mental health is an illness And are you immune to heart attacks? Are you immune to diabetes? Are you immune to any other health related issue just because you're spiritual? No. Those are the people who would go to a doctor because they're feeling a pain in their tummy, right? Now, if you know some of the symptoms of mental health issues, where you might be having a panic attack and you're having your heart is racing and you're feeling these very physical symptoms of what's going on for you, because it's not just here. So this is the thing with mental health issues. People just think it's hidden here, but it comes from here, but it's expressed so physically. So you can actually, you feel it within your body, and it could come in as a pain in your tummy or a heart beating. So those things are very physical. So yes, you can pray that you make it to the doctor's place because you're hoping that you're not going to collapse and die. You can pray, and I see spirituality is a strength. It helps us. It's one of the tools that are in our toolbox to help us go through this very difficult journey of illness and recovery through mental health issues. It does not make us immune to a mental health issue. Absolutely does not.
And we
because we should treat it exactly the same as our experiences with any physical illness.
Yeah, and we should not confuse the spiritual issues with mental issues.
Absolutely not.
Even though spiritual issues, I mean, our spirituality can help address our mental issues, as long as we acknowledge that we have first to acknowledge that we have.
Let's use it as a strength to help us, to give us hope of another day. To keep, one of the things about the experience of mental health issues, it takes the things that drives you, the things that makes the meaning to life, our meaning to who we are and what we are about in this life. It takes all of that away from us as the experience of an illness itself. So having spirituality and our connections to God, our connections to whatever it is that we hold close, gives us that hope that the sun will rise again, that I will go through this difficult time and I'll be okay. And it doesn't mean that it's just only the hope, but then as we go through the journey, we get the professional help and other supports, we still have hope for life. That keeps us well. That's the strength of our spirituality.
Absolutely. And perhaps one more thing as we finish, I mean, in terms of spirituality, if we stay in there, is actually, it may help a lot to prevent mental health, because if we are aware of our spiritual selves and how that interacts with our mental self and our biological self, then we may be in a more balanced situation where we recognize issues quite early and
absolutely
trying to address them.
See, you got it. You got it. That's it.
With me tonight. All right. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, time is against us. But I'm really happy with this conversation. It's the first with you on this platform, but definitely not the last. Would want to see you come back and grow more. Perhaps we'll talk next time. We'll talk more about some preventive measures, more on the prevention side, to recognize early signs of issues that, because I suppose we get exposed to so much stress these days, so much busyness, all that. It's a whole lot of things that we have to carry as load in our minds, and that ultimately the minds give up sometimes. So absolutely. Thank you, Sharon, for maybe just one last word you want to say to those watching.
I would say, look after you. You matter. You are valuable to us, and you are absolutely worth it. So look after you, because if you can't look after others if you don't look after you.
All right. That's a very nice way to end this conversation. Sharon Orapeleng, thank you very much for your time to African Knowledge. We appreciate your time. And for those watching, we thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing this video. We encourage you to do so. We encourage you to like our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, click that notification bell so you get automatically updated when we publish new content. And if you have something to share, we encourage you to come and talk to us so that we can bring that to the community, just like Sharon has done tonight. Thank you very much, and have a good night, everyone.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.